What a difference a year makes for Calgary's housing market. According to new data from the Calgary Real Estate Board, the number of available listings has jumped more than 30% compared to October of last year. Over the same period, sales have slumped and prices are down. And instead of bidding wars, properties are staying on the market for more than 40 days on average. To help us break down what we're seeing, we're joined by Ann-Marie Lurie. She's the chief economist with the Calgary Real Estate Board, CREB. How would you characterize the market in Calgary right now?
Well, we've shifted into much more balanced territory compared to what we were, and when we think about the apartment sector and the role, that's really where we're seeing advantages shift to the buyer. So very different than compared to what we had last year.
Yeah, so a year ago, it was tough to find a detached home just about anywhere in the city for less than $500,000. How much has that detached home market changed?
Well, it's still difficult to find, lower price detached homes. So that hasn't changed so much. We have to remember that while there is still supply growth, most of that supply is still priced over 600,000. So the detached market is actually it's better supplied now than it was, but it's not that there's a lot of supply that's in the lower price ranges.
Okay. Now, the condo market, there's some contrast there. It does seem to be slumping. Can you explain what's happening in the condo market?
So part of this is because there's been so much new construction that's happened over the past several years. Now, some of it is rental as well as condo specific, but the fact that there's just generally more supply in rental means that, rental rates have been coming down, vacancy rates have increased. So that slows that transition from renters into owners. So that takes off some of that demand for apartment condo. And then at the same time, there's just much more supply choice in general outside of apartment condos. So you have more row options, you have more semis, as well as more detached. So what we tend to find is that impacts the apartment condo sector far more than any other sector.
Now, when you bring into, the condo market, the detached market, you think about interest rates, the cost of borrowing money, you think about the economy, all these other things. What are you seeing from buyers? Are they waiting out the market, or what are they up against?
Well, we're seeing less buyers, or at least the buyers that are in the market now. There's much more choice for them. So we're seeing that while sales are down, it's important to remember that they're still kind of high relative to like long-term trends. So it's not that we've seen a complete drop off in demand, not by any means. And this is where Calgary is very different than a lot of other areas. So while we have sales slow, the reality is we're still really achieving levels that are very consistent with long-term trends. So, but what's happening is that demand now has so much more options. So buyers can choose the new. They can stay in rental. They have a lot more options in resale. So that same pool of buyers is just has much more supply options, and that's where our market's a little different. Now, could people still be waiting for further rate decreases? That's very possible, and that's something that will play into the market next year, of course, depending on what happens in the economic conditions.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you've given some sort of buyer and seller conditions and values, condo reality, standalone housing reality. What do you see as the big picture? And I'm curious specifically if you think it's fair to say the city is still in a housing crisis.
I think a housing crisis has to be put perspective. I mean, we have market housing and we have non-market housing. Do we have enough non-market housing? Do we have enough lower price options? That still is questionable. Now, when it comes to the market stuff in terms of how much supply options we have a far much more supply. There is much more balance in the market. So for people who are looking for properties, the issue is now doesn't meet with the current needs, right? So as I mentioned before, it's not that we have a lot of supply in the lower price ranges. Most of that lower price supply is apartment condos. 61% of like even the row homes still fall between 300,000 to 500,000. So does that still meet the needs of the people that are looking for that product? So I think that crisis really needs to be defined better as what segment of the population is in crisis. Is it the people who really need non-market housing, those lower income individuals? Because that is a very different story.
Yeah. No, that's an important distinction. I mean, obviously there are people, and in fact whole demographics, who would be experiencing crisis around trying to find shelter in a good way. But I appreciate you kind of expanding on the market conditions more broadly. So what would you say is the outlook for the rest of 2025 and into the new year and the spring season?
I think that really when we look at the next few months, I mean, we're heading into the winter months, lower levels of activity, but still expected to remain on trend with, how we typically see our market behave through these next few months. What I'll be watching for next year is really those supply numbers. And I think one of the challenges is there's still a lot of product that's under construction that'll be completed. So I expect that some of those challenges in the apartment condo sector will persist into next year, impacting prices in that market, and road to a certain extent as well. When we think about the detached market again, they haven't seen the same supply growth as what we've seen in the other segments of the market. So you should see much more stability in that market versus the other segments.
Yeah.
And of course, things matter by location. We have very different trends playing out depending on where in the city you're looking at. Prices and even on the detached side range from, growth in pricing in areas like the city center to some significant declines over in the Northeast district. So it's really important to remember that the market is shifting not equally across all property types or locations.